We move now to Dr. Malik Maaza, who will talk about smart nanomaterials for energy, green air conditioning, and nanofluids. Dr. Malik. To you, Dr. Malik.
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
Colleagues, dear chair, dear president, and colleagues from different parts of the world, allow me please to, first of all, request the apology to the organizers in view of the aim of the conference. I preferred more or less to not to give a scientific talk, but rather to present, to share with you a lecture related to the titled SARS-CoV2 pandemic effects on the R&D community in Africa, challenges and opportunities. I preferred to share with you this contribution that I just gave last week to the National Academies of Science in the US, because it's timely, proper to discuss and to share with you this, how can I say, this aspect that we will be sharing in Africa. I wish also to acknowledge and express my gratitude to the IAS top management and directorship in allowing us as the members of the Islamic diaspora in South Africa to share with you some of our thoughts. Well, the reason is that from the African perspective, we do share quite a number of problems which are also proper to the Middle East. That is the health issues, one. Second, it's a water scarcity. And the third, of course, it's energy. So allow me please, before starting, and in addition, I would like to mention that the work that I will be sharing with you is done within the framework of what we call the NanoAFNet and the UNESCO UNISA Africa Chair in Nanosciences and Nanotechnologies. And both of the two platforms, which are very well funded, their mission is geared towards Africa as a whole. That is North Africa, East, West, Central Africa, and South Africa. And in addition to that, within the UNESCO chair, we are geared towards the South, and in particular, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, Oman, and at a certain extent, Yemen. Well, allow me please to share with you these numbers and to correct the Mercator projection, because we have always a wrong perception on the African continent. Africa, size-wise, has the size, includes the size of the total of the USA, plus China completely, in addition to the subcontinent of India and Japan at a certain extent, as well as the full of Eastern and Western Europe with the UK within the Madagascar. In addition to that, above the size, Africa is the youngest continent, and by 2030, more than 60% of the population of the African continent, being it half a Muslim and half Christian and others, will be 60% have less than 25 years. And it's the continent which is the home of 9 fast-growing economies. The challenges that I would, the outline of my contribution that I would like to share with you is the challenges facing the R&D community in Africa, the opportunities that the SARS-CoV has brought to us. In effect, at a certain extent, we are really lucky. We thank indirectly the SARS-CoV2 because it brought us, it brought us new ideas and new opportunities. And I will conclude by some foresights towards the necessity to go through multilateralism multidisciplinarity, as it was mentioned, and certainly sustainable science diplomacy, North-South and South-South, and Jordan is an outstanding example with the Sesame platform in that regard. In terms of challenges, well, how can I say, I take this title BC and AC, adaptation and mind shift. BC, I took this more or less this structure from our previous DG of the IAS. Before, it's not before Christ or after Christ, it's before Corona and after Corona. We need really to adapt ourselves and to have each of us, both senior and juniors, policymakers or scientists, or in the private sector, we have to have a swift and prompt mind shift in the fact that based on the fact that the pandemics are cyclic. Well, we should just go through the 1918th one with such a huge fatalities, 57, 10 years after 68, 10 years after the H1N1 influenza, and the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, which has costed nearly 300,000 fatalities. Well, knowing that a vaccine takes a little bit 30 years to be able to come from to go through all the production chain until the final approval and its application, well, it happened that this time because a public private sector partnership and an open source of data has made it possible to get a vaccine in a year and a half. Well, the challenges that the African continent is facing, as certainly a number of other parts of the world, are first of all, mobility restriction. Second, the grid accessibility. Third, low internet penetration in the African continent. And fourth, the high gender equity gap in the African continent, both North and South, and the center, East and West. And fifth, which is extremely, very, very important parameter, which is the large youth influx. We will have a huge amount of youth coming to the market soon if they are not trained correctly, or they have not a profile of training which adapted to the market. And certainly the low GDP investment by the African continent. Allow me please to go to the mobility restriction, which is extremely important. Within the African continent, historically speaking, the bulk of the cooperation is done within the north. If you take north of Africa, Morocco included, Algeria and Tunisia, the bulk of exchange are with France. They are nearly 40%, while Egypt is more or less more diverse with the USA, with the UK and Saudi Arabia and so on. But the rest of the African continent, that is Nigeria, Kenya and South Africa, which are the major R&D producer or knowledge producers, their cooperation is mainly towards the USA, UK, and at a certain extent with Germany for a number of them. And well, with the corona and the restriction of visas and so on, this mobility, this cooperation would be heavily affected. And therefore, there is a need for the African continent to create both regional, as our colleague from Morocco has mentioned, there is a really need to create at least a North African dynamic between these giants in R&D, as well as here in this case of the Western Cape, West Africa, whereby Nigeria can be the hub, whereby the community here can exchange or create a mobility program. The same thing for South Africa, the Southern Africa, which has in effect started. So there is a need for us to create a human capital mobility, as Europe has done correctly, within the continent. So is the case of the Middle East. In particular, Sesame is a wonderful platform. That was a visionary program. And in our case, we have started the dialogue with the colleagues from who are in charge of the Sesame platform to hopefully create in the future a synchrotron more or less in the African continent. Therefore, again, the conclusion of this is that the governments and the African Union has decided to go for a human capital mobility program within the African continent, and I will share with you some of them. The second challenge in the African continent, as you can see here, is a map by NASA showing clearly that all the other parts of the world are quite light, while the African continent is dark, except some region that is north of Africa, Egypt, and Southern Africa. While in the case of Middle East, I don't think that we have this problem, but in our case, in some cases here in Africa, coal is a dominated source of energy, so it's a burden at a certain extent. But nonetheless, the bulk of the African science and community do not have access to electricity, therefore no internet. 17% of the African population has no direct access to the national grid. The other challenge in the African continent, which is also somehow in the Middle East, is that Africa has the lowest penetration of internet. So is also the Southeast Asia as ranked the second somehow. And this, yet the internet penetration is mainly dominated by mobile. And therefore there is a difficulty for high education institution to access ODL, open distance learning type, or Zoom type, or Teams type high education. So there is a need to work on it. In addition to that, Africa and the Middle East share a common point here, which is a very low gender equality index, except in Africa, except for Rwanda and Namibia, who are dealing with it with the gender equality index above 0.6. But this is a common point between, and as we will see, that in effect, if we from the Middle East, and in particular the Islamic country in Arab and countries, as well Africa, if we address this, if we reduce this gender equality gap, it will push for an increase in the GDP. Well, also the other challenge that we share with the Arab and the Muslim countries is the low R&D expenditure in terms of GDP. As you can see, Africa is a 1% maximum in GDP. It's except South Africa, more or less, all the other African countries, they are less than 0.9%. Well, as I have mentioned before, in effect, one of the very tough challenges is that Africa is the youngest continent in the world. Among the 10 top youngest nations in the world are in Africa. And the bulk of them are in the Islamic world. So these fellows who have, these youth who have less than 24 years old, certainly they will come in 2025 to the higher education systems, and therefore it is necessary to adapt ourselves to distance learning type approaches and so on, and address this issue here. What is sure is that not all is blank so far. There are opportunities, and these opportunities are we have, how can I say, we do witness currently during this COVID very robust, enhanced North-South and South-South, as well as continental cooperation that we have not, we have witnessed it in the past, but it has been, it increased by magnitudes of orders of magnitudes. In addition to that, a number of countries are investing in what is called i-GDP investment, high internet penetration and broadband. In addition to that, a number of countries, at least in Africa, have pushed for more gender equity and GDP increase in the R&D. And certainly multidisciplinarity, which is something that I have witnessed myself. Well, by tradition, the major North-South cooperation between Africa and the North was dominated by the Trieste system. That is the Abdul Salam ICTP. We are really thankful to the ICTP and Abdul Salam for his fantastic vision. And of course, to the word of the TUTWAS and the IAP, the International Organization of Women in Science, and ICGEB. With this institution, we embark in fund matching type initiatives. While the research programs are limited to the physical sciences, in this case here within the ICTP, we embarked extensively with the Swedish government in particular, whereby other disciplines are considered in terms of human capital development, because the major or the cornerstone programs of this North-South cooperation is human capital development. Well, also with the US, there is quite a boost in terms of North-South cooperation within the US through the peer partnership for enhanced engagement in research. In effect, one of the fellows who is handling this program is a Muslim fellow, young dynamic Muslim fellow, originally from Morocco, Dalal Najib, and she is the one who is driving this program. And I think, at least from our African perspective, we are pushing quite extensively for such a dynamic. Also, with the Royal Society and the African Academy of Science, I do firmly believe that the EIS and the Royal Society can engage in such a kind of initiative. Is that there is a program geared towards youngsters. It's called FLAIR, Future Leaders African Independent Research Fellows. This is a fantastic funding to encourage young, emerging, brilliant scientists to stay at home countries and to create their research programs. And they're heavily sponsored somehow. Also, the African Academy of Science has entered in partnership with the Royal Society and the Bill and Melinda Gates, as well as with the Wellcome Trust, in what we call IESA, the Alliance for Accelerating Excellence in Science in Africa. And this is a program also geared towards shifting the center of gravity of African science to Africa. So the research is focused on the needs within the continent, while funded in a partnership with the Royal Society in the UK. And I do firmly believe that the EIS can certainly enter in partnership with the Royal Society and these partners in creating the equivalent of IESA, in particular towards the health sciences. Also, the German colleagues, German institution, we embarked with them in a forceful manner, a very sound manner, through the AGNES, for example, is African German Network of Excellence in Science. There is no reason for which we could not think by creating something equivalent to the with the Middle East and Islamic and Arab countries. And this was created in Yaoundé in 2011 in Cameroon, and it has 4 programs. All of them are extremely very successful, both human capital development as well as senior scientist mobility within the African continent, within the regions, west, east, north, south, as well as in German laboratories. And also we have noticed that suddenly within the COVID era, a boost of a human dynamic and cooperation between different continental platforms. That is, for example, the African Laser Center, and we will definitely explore possibilities with Professor Shokat, as he has mentioned, and the African Material Research Society, which has been created with the NSF and the National Research Foundation of South Africa, the ANSOLE, which is based in Linz, in the African Network for Solar Energy, the NanoAfnet, which was created in ICTP in Trieste, which is headquartered in the Western Cape here, the SunBio, as well as the UNESCO chair. I wish just to, and other networks. I wish just to mention that quite a number of these national or continental network were created at the Abdus Salam ICTP. So the idea is to duplicate the spirit of Abdus Salam, may his soul stays in peace, within the African continent. Well, in terms of opportunities also, we have witnessed a boost of investment by the private sector as well as the public sector. As you can see, quite a number of African countries, such as Morocco, for example, 2.3%, South Africa 1.4%, Senegal leading by 3.3%. It's maybe half of Sweden, but it's not negligible at all. And it shows clearly that quite a number of these countries in Africa, Muslim countries, are believing in the investment, and therefore certainly high penetration of the internet and internet-based technologies. I would like just to stress on this specific World Economic Forum study, which was really done in depth. I was involved in it, and it was really done by top expert in the world. And I must say the conclusion is that if we reduce the gender gap and to have it as close as to 1 possible and not to 0.6, at least in our case in Africa, Africa will witness the highest GDP increase by 2025, 11.7%. And the same, how can I say, the same thing in the quite a number of the Arab nations here in the Middle East, as well as you can see here, the neighboring countries in India, at Bangladesh, Pakistan, and so on. So it is a necessity to have as much as possible of female scientists, female students and postgrads, trained as much as possible and becoming entrepreneurs to ensure that we will close this gap and gain from them. We are neglecting 50% of humanity. This is not right at all. We have to push to close this gap, so to ensure that we will gain in terms of GDP. And well, as it was mentioned by our president and Professor Adnan Badran, is multidisciplinarity is a solution, is really a gate to move fast to enhance the critical mass. In our case, in the field of nanosciences and nanotechnology, we were not limiting ourselves to the material science, but we went to different sectors and so on. And it happened that in the SARS-CoV period here that we are living, we found out that we are working extensively with the health sector. Well, not only to enhance the critical mass, but the medical sector will bring us more female ratio, more gender equity, and more know-how somehow. And well, I would like just to share with you the result of this multidisciplinarity, multi-dynamic, how can I say, multi-dynamic, multilateral cooperation and so on. When we created the NanoAfnet in Trieste in 2005, we were somewhere there. When we created we were working mainly between us as Africans, mainly, of course, with the ICTP. And when we created the UNESCO UNISA Africa Chair in Nanosciences and Nanotechnology, UNESCO advised us to work with the South, that is Latin America, and that's the Middle East, and countries such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, and so on. And colleagues, here is, I would agree with the Prof. Karim when he mentioned that the number of publication is not really as important as the quality. The quality is reflected by the citations. As you can see, colleagues, the citations moved from some hundreds to thousands, and it's really growing in an exponential way. And this I can say that is Google or Scopus, but it shows the quality and the visibility of the science and R&D conducted. In addition to that, during this period of training here, not only the science quality has increased, but the fellows have been trained in entrepreneurship, and there are quite a number of fellows. There are 2 Moroccan fellows who got patents through these trainings. And I would like just to stress again on the aspect of human capital development that our colleague from Qatar has mentioned. She is absolutely right. We have to prepare the workforce of tomorrow. They are the ones, these youngsters. And as you can see, these are the youngsters from different parts of the world, including war zones like Libya, and before it was Rwanda, and different countries, Muslim countries, that is Algeria and DRC, Egypt, and so on and so on. In addition to that, not only limited to the postgrad level, but also to the senior scientists, but certainly the female component. These are ours. Each of us, if we don't have a sister, if we don't have a daughter, we are obliged to have a mother. And we are neglecting these female scientists. It is not right from us. And I can assure you, colleagues, that all these fellows here are award-winning. All of them, one by one. The Moroccan lady, the South African, the Cameroonian, the Sudanese, and so on and so on. We are neglecting, and we should remember one thing. The first Muslim was Khadija radiallahu anha. We have to remember this, and we have to ensure that we have to attract as much as possible of female scientists, female students to embrace science in general. Well, just to give you an idea, all these fellows, more or less, that we have trained, now they are at their home countries, but that has not stopped them to cooperate and to come with some intelligent coding that certainly would interest our colleagues, Prof. Shaukat from Pakistan, because these coatings now are used in small satellites to control the heat. And this is Zabib Nourou from Cameroon, from Ethiopia, Aline Simou from Cameroon, Botumelo Mashabakasha from Botswana, and Nana Nagla Nu'man from Sudan. Not limited to that, also it has allowed the fellows to target problems related to solar energy, but coming from different countries, that is Senegal, Nigeria, Cameroon, Lesotho, and South Africa. So this clearly shows that we are creating a dynamic within the continent, and therefore it is necessary to create a human capital mobility within the Muslims country. It's really important. These fellows should go and converge to center of excellence wherever they are. In Pakistan, they are outstanding biotech centers. They are outstanding. There are outstanding chemistry centers. Therefore, we send our fellows to Pakistan. Therefore, fellows from Kuwait, from Qatar, should send also to where the knowledge is. And well, just to give you a typical example, and I will conclude by this pre-final transparency, is that here, for example, we have found that our colleagues from Pakistan are highly qualified in the field of biotech and the green nanochemistry. So we want to cooperate with them, in particular with Professor Zabta Khan Shinwari, and also with Iran extensively, and not limited to that. So also we are trying to go for a human, for a joint diploma within the African continent. So this fellow from Sudan graduated from the University of South Africa as the other fellows, but also they go back to their home and present the same research, and they get the diploma from their own institution. So it is a trust between high education institution. It is a move towards a higher Amati, Shanghai, and QS ranking. It is a higher visibility, and it is a move towards critical mass, and therefore to join our efforts and to finalize, to get a solution. Well, the same thing here for Rwanda, Egypt, Burundi, and Cameroon. And I wish really to mention that what we are trying to do, at least at a very small level, at a really very, very small droplet level, is what the ICTP has done. So we are translating the spirit of Abdul Salam in that sense, as well as we're creating somehow with this multilateralism, bringing colleagues from the Arab and Muslim world to South Africa. We're trying to duplicate somehow at a certain level, at our level, very small, of course, the spirit of the CERN. So just before, as a conclusion, I would, colleagues and Honorable President of our Academy, I wish really to make 3 recommendations. First of all, our centers, the UNESCO chair and the NanoAFNet, is open to the Islamic community, the IIS community. How can I say, we do embark in a co-fund matching type. We fund the fellows when they arrive to South Africa. For example, we cover all the fees, the accommodation, the research, the daily stipend, and so on and so on. And in sometimes we also cover the flight costs. And so my recommendation is, 1, it is necessary to create a human capital mobility within the Islamic countries. 1. Second is it is necessary to identify nodes of excellence, centers which have a heavy infrastructure. And the third, to encourage fellows to strengthen their partnership and using the programs of the Trieste system, that is the TWAS, that is the International Organization of Women in Science, and so on and so on. But anyway, our center, the NanoAFNet and the UNESCO chair, do welcome whoever is highly qualified in the field of nanosciences and nanotechnology to come to visit us. We will cover all the costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malek. for this
Merci French. شكرا.
talk.
Pakistani.
We go to the last but not the least talk by Dr. Zabta Shinwari. He will talk about Islamic